Hi, everybody. It's Alex Jarett again with an interview with our new Board of Advisors member, Kim Bailey. Hi, Kim. How are you?
I am great, Alex. How are you doing?
Awesome. Great to have you involved. And for those of you who don't know Kim, he's the VP of Information Technology at a company called Farm Bureau Insurance of Michigan. That's in Lansing, Michigan, right, Kim? We were just talking about that,
Correct.
which
Yes.
I
Yes.
understand when you ask someone from Michigan, where is Lansing? They go, right here, right in the middle of the state, right?
Yeah.
That's
That's
great.
perfect, Alex.
Yeah, thank you. I got it. I always think of Ann Arbor because the college
Yeah.
that college, and then of course I know there's a bunch of great colleges actually in Michigan. So the Farm Bureau Insurance of Michigan. For those of you who don't know, I want Kim to tell the story. There's actually a lot of Farm Bureau insurance companies across the country. I remember you told me this when you first joined the board. Is that right? There's a number of them.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Tell us a little about the Farm Bureau
Yeah.
concept. You know,
Yeah.
because
Yeah. It's
I found that very interesting when we first spoke.
right. Yeah. If you actually summed all of the independent Farm Bureau insurance companies together, they would rank as probably the third largest insurance provider, throughout the world.
Uh,
Each one of the farm bureaus kind of have certain states of operation. Um, every farm bureau has started as the premise of first with a nonprofit organization, which is the parent company.
yeah.
In our case, it's called Michigan Farm Bureau. And that's a volunteer organization that's all about agricultural advocacy and
Huh.
helping with establishing law and regulation on a state and federal basis that supports agricultural growth, economy, et cetera. And in our case, the insurance organization was formed to then help support farmers and then grew over time to expand, beyond just serving the farm market to serving customers throughout the state. And so that's kind of the
Oh, that's
premise,
interesting.
of companies. And so you might hear a company called Alpha. Um, that's a Farm Bureau company that's down in the South. They have the states, including Alabama, as an example.
Yeah.
And then you've got Southern Farm Bureau, which includes a different group of states. And then you've got individual state companies like ourselves, Indiana Farm Bureau, Kentucky Farm Bureau, Tennessee Farm Bureau, et cetera.
Oh, well, that's really interesting. So, I didn't really realize that. So you're the CIO. You're actually the VP of Information Technology. And when I look at your background, and I look at, just kind of the recent things that you've done, actually for the last recent being the last 20 years or so, you know, you're Vice President of Information Technology and you were VP of Information Systems Division. I guess what does that mean? Information Systems Division would be more like the IT ops stuff, and now you run everything, including business
Yeah,
process and everything.
it actually was just the graduation of realizing that information services was an expired term. So
Uh,
I've always been in charge of all of IT here at Farm Bureau. It
got
was
it.
just updating the naming to be information technology.
Got it. And you've done that for, it says 9 years. It's really almost 10
Yeah,
years you've been
yeah,
doing
yeah,
that. And
yeah.
yeah, so you do your group does all the back end stuff, the business process, automation. So I got to tell you,
Everything. We've got it
everything.
all.
Yeah. Well, it's, I've had some other folks from, there's a lady from AAA that's spoke a couple of times. I know there's a lot of really cool stuff that you all have been doing in insurance in general with customer experience, and you got involved in that side, but that's pretty cool, right?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's really exciting what's been happening at our company. I thought it'd be helpful to give a little bit of a profile.
Yeah.
So, in terms of an organization, Farm Bureau Insurance is just right at $1 billion of premium. We have property and casualty insurance, which is the bulk of our premium
Got
base,
it.
but we also sell life insurance and annuity products.
Oh,
And our personal and commercial business is solely based in Michigan. We're a single state writer for that. But our life insurance operation, the bulk of it is Michigan, but we've acquired two companies since I've been here One is called Leaders Life, and they operate in about 6 states. And then we acquired Cincinnati Equitable Life Insurance Company, and they operate in 8 states. So from a life processing perspective, we're now operating in 14 states, in addition to Michigan.
Yeah.
The Leaders company that we acquired is focused on group place life insurance products that are portable. So if a person leaves, they can actually take their life insurance with them from one working company to another. And then the Cincinnati Equitable is a final needs type product. But, as an organization, we're $1 billion.
Yeah.
And we've had quite the journey. A lot of people, as you mentioned, Alex, a lot of people are really focused on customer experience.
Uh-huh.
And that's certainly the case for us. We're going through a major digital transformation in the process of updating our website. In fact, we started working with a company called Gravity Works that's a web design and a strategy company. And we were so pleased with their work, we acquired them.
Wow.
And our Gravity Works division reports up through me. We acquired them because we knew we had a lot of digital transformation work to do.
Yeah.
But also we specialize, with farm insurance. We have a number of commercial insurance customers, and we felt this would be an additional value-added service that if a farming group or if a commercial group needed assistance with their digital footprint, that our Gravity Works organization could help them as contract services.
Wow, that's
And
super
so
cool.
we really felt that was a good add-on for us and a good add-on for our offering for our customers. But we're in the midst of totally redoing our digital footprint to make it easier for customers to do business with us online and remove friction points. We're in the process of also implementing Salesforce as a CRM system to replace a legacy one that we have.
Yeah.
And the other thing I wanted to talk about was something that's been keeping me a little busy since I started here is we've been in the process of replacing our personal and commercial claims, billing, and policy systems. And for an insurance company, that's the heart of an insurance company. Those 3 systems process, all of the transactions that happen with a person. And we selected Guidewire as our solution for the future. And our journey has been, we're totally there for claims processing for personal and commercial business.
Mm-hmm.
And we're 85% of the way there for policy and billing transactions.
Wow.
But that's been quite a journey.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to ask you I'm going to come back to that and ask you a few questions here about a lot of the stuff you just shared with us, which is amazing. I can't imagine rewriting the entire system, but let me get back to that, because before you were at Farm Bureau, you were at PwC, right? You did that, and I guess
Yep.
You started your career, which was I found really interesting to me. Most folks don't have this path, but I do see a lot of business people that go into IT. Your actual original background was in Indiana. If I go way back, I'm not gonna say how far back. They can look it up. So if you
Way
go
back.
way back, oh yeah, not as far as me, I guarantee you. So you go way back. You were actually in marketing and finance and business. And what I found really interesting is when you first started. You told me on the side when we were just talking that you first started out. You were in claims, right? Is it claims? And
actually, it was underwriting. I was in
I'm sorry.
underwriting. Yeah, and I worked for Allstate Insurance for a regional office out of Indianapolis with Allstate, and started as a personal underwriter working with them and worked my way up through different leadership roles there. When I was at Allstate, my step into the dark side of technology was that I helped our regional office develop automated underwriting rules for personal and commercial transactions. And apparently I did that well enough that Allstate asked me to come into the home office and help develop the countrywide renewal program for automated underwriting. And one thing led to another, and an opportunity became available at Meridian Insurance to
Yeah.
do that sort of work. And I started in automation solely at Meridian, worked up to become the CIO at Meridian. And so the rest, as they say, is history.
Yeah. Now, that is really a great story, everybody, because what I'm hearing, Kim, is that you were really on the business side. You understood, how insurance was underwritten, which is, I mean, at the end of the day, it's placing bets, and you understood the actual core business. So when they brought you, you obviously had an affinity or an aptitude for automation and process design and translating that into automation, or at least into words and pictures and diagrams that programmers could figure out. And that's pretty amazing story, which now explains to me how you rose. So if y'all go look at him on LinkedIn, he rose pretty quickly back in the day and stayed there. And now you're running this huge billion-dollar enterprise. How many people are on your team?
Yeah, we have 122 people in our IT organization.
Yeah, that's amazing.
And then we have some, in addition to that, we then have some consulting partners that work with us on a regular basis, and then some special project consulting folks.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing. So now let's go back to some of the projects you just shared with me that you've done, and we'll talk a little about that. I hear so many people say to me, if they're in manufacturing, we got to redo our manufacturing systems. We got to redo our ERP. Nobody wants to do it. You all took the job in your business, the whole insurance system and underwriting system. That is essentially the business, right? Is essentially,
it is the business.
It's the business. It's how this company tracks everything, manages everything, and also tells the sales rep, yes, you can sell, or no, you can't, right? And the underwriters are behind the scenes saying yes and no and all that stuff. Is that correct? It's the core system.
Yes. Yeah.
So how do you go about rewriting a core system like that? I mean, if you give us a lesson learned on something like that, I mean, I talk to so many CIOs that are like, oh gosh, we really don't want to do that. But I know everybody's got technical debt. At some point, they kind of got to do it.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
that's a technical phrase. Go ahead.
So one thing might be I was a glutton for punishment because I volunteered to do this. I signed up for this. So one thing that I mentioned to Alex that I would share is, first of all, I would advise it's never about the technology. It's always about the people, about the relationships, and it's about the business.
Mm-hmm.
And what I felt was critical for us before we got started was to actually establish our key measures of success.
Oh.
And when we think about claims processing, what are the core outcomes that we have to be able to achieve?
Mm-hmm.
What are the core outcomes that are important to achieve but not have to? And then what are the ones that would be nice, icing on the cake, if you will?
Yeah.
And we started with claims, and we actually did a big bang conversion with claims, which means we developed the program, went through the process to make sure we could handle all of the different kinds of transactions. And it's the complete life cycle of a claim. It's including going out and getting investigative information that you need to help settle the claim, information about values of homes or cars, integration services like that, doing those pieces, and then all of the logic steps, the process steps to actually then service and settle that claim. And so we brought all of our open claims and all closed claims for the past 2 years prior to doing conversion. And literally on Friday, people went home on our old claim system, and on Monday, we were on the new claim system. And that was quite a journey.
I can't even imagine.
I would have you picture the day we went live.
Yeah.
we had done a lot of preparation for the claims people of what the new system looked like. So we had done some OCM kind of stuff with them. But we used a balloon concept, helium balloons, and had helium balloons at every desk. And so a person could raise their balloon if they needed assistance on a string. And that way we could literally walk through the different claims area and help answer questions or see if something was happening that shouldn't be happening. And so it was like a massive conversion all happening at once.
So hang on, let me get this. So it's hundreds of desks. Everybody, if you haven't been in an insurance company, usually it's hundreds of desks in this huge room.
And it was hundreds of desks.
So you have a balloon and it's just low, and then they raise the string. Is that what you're saying? So you can just visually say, oh, there's 5 people who need help.
Yep. Go to Sally's desk. She needs some assistance.
I would be like that guy in the office. I'd keep raising my balloon a little higher. So maybe Sally, maybe what kind of
we go to Alex before we go to Sally.
Yeah. Anyways, so in your chart, when you signed up to be a board of advisors, one of the things you talked about is that you like helping people with complex systems implementation planning. I guess this is a perfect example of that. How do you plan something like that? If you're going to give us lessons learned, what would be the Kim Bailey secret sauce for doing something really big like this?
So one thing that is so important, I think, is you've got to be able to create the story of the journey in a way that resonates with the business people.
Interesting.
And so what I tried to do was understand what are the different major steps we're going to have to go through, but not just the major steps, be able to explain what are we doing in this phase of the work, what's going to happen, what's going to occur, along with what the measures of success for each step of the way was, and the outcomes that we would be able to achieve when we're done. Mm-hmm. And as we went forward, a lot of communication. Here's our update. Here's what's happening. I guarantee you stuff is going to occur that you didn't plan for. Something's going to take longer than expected. I wanted to be really transparent about if something was occurring, what it was, what we were doing to adjust for that, what the implications were going to be. Because that's just, if you bring people with you through the journey, you can get to good places. If you try to go do it in a vacuum and then say, here it is, it's going to be a miss.
Now, the way you described that was really interesting to me. You talked about journey. So you're telling stories. And what are you telling? What are you talking about in these stories? My guess is, I'm going to guess, you tell me if I'm right on base or if I'm wrong, that you're talking about solving their problems, right? Are you saying, here is the problem, here's the process, here's what we're going to change, and here's how it's going to feel and look like to you? What are you doing there?
Yeah, doing that, stories. Doing that piece, but also doing things along the lines of saying, okay, we're going to go through some requirements phases. And first, I'll back up a little bit. Mm. We also went to Agile as part of the implementation of this initiative.
Okay.
Agile, hybrid-based delivery.
Yeah.
The company historically was waterfall. So we needed to do education about, we're going to go epics, we're going to go stories, we're going to go sprints. And so we created major epics that they could visualize. This is my claims first notice of loss. This is my claims processing. And then within those, we would create the stories and the sprints. And so we literally would give them updates of, we've been able to achieve this portion of our work, and here's what's happening. And versus saying requirements and programming and testing, we tried to take it back to the business terms of, we're working on building this capability within the system at this point in time. We also wanted to make sure we really did a lot of demos along the way, so we could do two things: elicit feedback if we needed to make adjustments, but also so that they could see it, so they would know what to expect. They would be part of that, I use the word journey, they would be part of that journey side by side with you in the car, so they understood, I'm going to stop, get some gas, I'm going to go to the next
Yeah.
town and have dinner, etc.
Yeah. That's a great story. So that now that you explain that you're using Agile now, when I understand the story, what you're doing with the stories, and one of the things that I've heard from people that switch from waterfall to Agile is that some of the older folks, maybe people who've been around for a while, don't trust that the features are going to make their way into a next version. So scope creep starts to really mushroom in the early stages. I've heard this from a couple of other CIOs. I had another CIO was in manufacturing, running a manufacturing back into the manufacturing company. He said that exact thing. He said everybody here's been here for so long. Nobody believes us that this is the new process. Did you find that also? And if yes, how did you overcome that?
Yeah, I mean, it was huge.
Mm.
And I would say at that point, I, probably classify that our IT group, we had a group of people close to retirement. And really, we gave that group an opportunity to be part of the journey, but we let them choose. And some people didn't want to become part of that journey because of where they were at, how close they were to retirement, or just their interest. And so we tried, number one, to get people aligned to it that wanted to be part of the journey. But we did have those struggles, Alex, and we definitely at times had scope creep, and we had to keep coming back to people to say, I know you don't have all of the requirements yet. It's not all flushed out. We're talking about these little pieces, and you're working on these little pieces. How do I know this is all going to come together?
Yeah.
The epics was important for us because we would use the epics as a broader classification of here are the major deliverables, the major capabilities that are going to happen with this epic. And here's the next epic that happens. And we would then try to go back as we wrapped up the work for that epic of saying, okay, we've now been able to achieve those things. Maybe it's not all visual yet, but we try to take it back to the things that they asked for, to the things that we provided.
Yeah. Okay. That's pretty interesting. So I like that approach, that lesson learning, sort of how you let the people that maybe were more apt to do that choose. And so if they choose, now they're playing the game. If they don't choose, all right, yeah. So they won't slow you down. So what are some of the other lessons? When I look at your list on our site, everybody, if you haven't visited Kim's site, be sure and do so. His page on our site, his profile, leadership coaching, mentoring, and development. Tell us about that.
I'd say that's one of my biggest passions is wanting to help people and wanting to help develop leadership capabilities, coaching capabilities, doing those kind of things, and not for any personal recognition.
Yeah.
I get pleasure out of helping and serving others. And so, I think with leadership development, it's really understanding what are the traits and the strengths and the capabilities of that person.
Yeah.
What are their weaknesses? What are the things they worry about? What are the things they feel good about? And then helping them think through those things that are challenges and those things that are strengths. I talk a lot about, leadership isn't something you're done with. It isn't something you can check the box with.
Mm-hmm.
Leadership and leadership development is forever. You're always evolving as a person. You're always evolving as a leader, and your work as a leader is never done. We literally, here, we literally started leadership development training the day I started with the company. And every leadership meeting we had, we took 15 minutes of that leadership meeting to talk about a leadership topic or a situation we faced and how we could approach it differently, better the next time. So we actually embedded leadership development really in all of the work we were doing.
That's awesome. So for those of you watching this, when you see Kim sign up for one of our mentoring sessions, maybe Kim can bring some of that homework with him and share some of these tips. I think that's what you're already planning on doing, right? So yeah, which is, we're grateful for that. So some of the tips and methods Kim is going to bring to us, to you watching this, is tried and true in the field. These are techniques and strategies you've used in the field. So what would be, give us one example of that, sort of as an illustration, you know, of a like a topic or something that came up that really resonated with folks.
Yeah, so here was one. So, you know, within IT, you know, we tend to be introverts. I'm guilty of that. B, we also tend to be more organizationally minded, process minded. But if you work with different areas of the company, they're not built that way. They're not, their minds work different. And that's the strength they bring to the equation. And so we had a topic of, do we put people over process or process over people? And we took that as a broad topic, and then we took specific examples of situations that had happened on both ways, of the good of taking process over people and the bad of taking process over people, and vice versa. And we literally, as a leadership team, we would talk about that item, break out in small groups, have them write down or, you know, make some notes about, here's what worked, here's what didn't work, here's what I think we can do different the next time, and then come back as a group and delve further into that. So that's just an example of, you know, an approach that we've used.
It's an awesome example. Well, what do you have any other lessons learned that you want to share that you brought for today's conversation?
Yeah, you know, the other thing that, you know, I'd be happy to talk more about, that I talked about as an interest, is all around cybersecurity. Unfortunately, it's a necessary evil in our lives. Short of people issues, it's the thing that maybe I worry the most about, because you're always, you know, you're always in the fight. And, you know, one thing that I did that, you know, I just felt was so important was all about organizational readiness and preparedness. And would be happy to talk through the different steps, the different things that are important that you can do. And I think as a CIO, you are better served to trust and get the right people to manage the security of the company. But you've got to make sure you understand the vulnerabilities, and you've got to make sure you've prepared the strategy of, when something happens, what are we going to do? And you communicate that up and down throughout the company so people know what to expect. Your board knows what to expect. Your board knows your vulnerabilities. Your CEO knows the risks that are present. Your CEO knows the steps you would take. Those are pieces that I think are really critical, and that maybe sometimes not enough work is happening around the plan of, what do you do when something happens.
That's interesting. It's almost like a military operation where you say, okay, I see the movies where they say, okay, open the book, and then you see all this stuff. This is what we need to do in this situation, right?
Yeah, and ransomware's changed the world. You know, that it shuts companies down. And so we've done exercises. We've done exercises where, you know, with my corporate staff peers, I said, you know, we're going to all act as if our systems are not available. What are you going to do tomorrow? And we then had them each work as groups and talk about, okay, what am I going to do? I don't have a claim system. How am I going to service my customers? What's the steps I'm going to do? And so doing a lot of those kind of things really helps, you know, helps you know that you're ready if something happens.
Yeah, that's great. That is a, you know what, that's a great tip. I've done in the last year a half a dozen cybersecurity events. And everybody's giving great advice, but no one has said to do these kind of drills, Kim. So that's a really good lesson learned is to be ready and assume at some time it's going to happen, because everything I do hear from the cybersecurity, the experts is they're already in. If you're a big company, they're already in or just waiting for the moment. Doesn't mean they're gonna that the ransom software is in, but somebody is already in doing something behind the scenes in these really big companies, and you just gotta prepare it. The other tip that I heard maybe is that was a really good one. See what you think about this one. Is there's some of the new software that can just watch patterns and trends.
Yeah.
And if you like that, if you see a user or something where all of a sudden patterns are changing, I think it's an anomaly, and they pick it up. So,
yeah, and we've actually started to do that. I mean, some of the basic things are, we're doing geocoding, meaning we're evaluating where's the person logging in from, what's the access point, what's the access time, are they all of a sudden running a lot more transactions from their ID than what they would normally be doing? Is there a different pattern that we're seeing, like you just said, that's critical?
Yeah.
One thing I wanted to say before I forgot would be, this would be an ask for everyone else. Cyber is just a risk we face as a company.
Yeah.
But I think it helps us all if we talk about it, that it's a crime. And when we use terms to talk about cyber events, we talk about there's criminal activity that's happening in the world around us. These are criminals that are doing these things. Mm-hmm. Because what I think has happened is the word is turned around. It's almost like there's discussion about, well, what did the company do? The issue is, what did the criminal do? And I think the more we talk about it as a crime, the more we talk about as criminal activity, we can actually change the narrative of what the event is.
That is a huge insight. I have not heard that one either, which I think is great, because the CEOs or the CFO, CEO, National Connection, what did we do wrong? Nothing. We just got attacked. I mean, and it happened. I have never heard that tip, but I have heard that feeling described. I think you just said it in a really smart way. And the other thing that I've heard is that many of these criminals are actually working for nation states.
So absolutely.
So if you think China, North Korea, Russia, all these actors that are competing with the U.S. geopolitically in a lot of realms, and this is one of them. And a lot of the people in the world don't really see any of this and know it, but I think it is our responsibility in the technology to defend. So if you think of it in that manner, then all of a sudden you're able to get these initiatives passed, and you're able to get the support of the management team when you say, hey, we got to train, right, Kim? We got to be prepared.
I'm sure some of you have heard, but to put it in perspective, the monetization of cyber events now, it's drawing in more funds, more income from people than illegal drug sales ever did. And just to put it in perspective, I mean, we're talking billions and billions, maybe trillions of dollars at this point.
Yeah.
That's how big it's become. And Alex, you're right. It used to be the kid in the basement, then it was a group, and now it's a state that's out there doing it.
Now, the last thing I want to ask you about is, in your profile, you talked about one of your strengths that you like to help people and mentor people with is strategic planning and roadmap planning. Is that right?
Yeah.
So you like doing that kind of planning stuff?
Yeah. I'm a big believer, us as CIOs, we need to be at the table. We need to help explain how technology can help the business achieve its goals. And in order to do that, we need to understand the business model that we're serving. We need to know what makes that work. And then from a planning perspective, we've got to be able to communicate the approach we're going to take, the steps we're going to take in a way that the business customers understand.
Mm-hmm.
And not in a way that's comfortable to us, not in a way from a technology basis.
Yeah.
It's what are the outcomes we're going to drive? The better you can create the story of where you're going and what you're trying to achieve, the more alignment you're going to have throughout the way, the better the results are going to be along the way, and the outcomes are going to get you to where you need to get to. The other thing is you're going to be invited to the table for your perspective, not just your perspective about the technology, but your perspective about how do we solve this problem? And at the end of the day, we should focus on how do we solve the problem.
It seems to me that the natural transition for the CIO used to be a ceiling. I don't think there's a ceiling anymore. I personally think that you could run this company. You know, this maybe we shouldn't let the CEO hear this one, but you know, you could
not
run
as good as my CEO.
Yeah,
He's far better.
He's awesome. He's amazing. God bless that guy. You know, so but you think about it, I've seen CIOs go to COO in the current company. That, in fact, one of our other board members, Tom Knapp, he was a CIO. There's another board advisory member who's a chief, they call him a chief administrative officer. You know, so I see that starting to happen. You talk about seat at the table. My point is, everybody that's watching this is in IT. If you're a CIO, director of IT, you must demand that seat at the table. And if you don't, you got to really figure out how to do it, because your company won't be able to thrive and let alone survive, let alone thrive in the future if you don't. I'm a big believer in encouraging people, empowering IT executives to get out of that old mindset of IT ops. We only give them what they ask for. No, this is a new world where you all should be leading this. Do you agree with that, Kim? I mean, you're actually a business person that got an IT. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say that, Alex. I mean, think about the power, the difference of if plans are being created and stuff is happening, and then they say, I want you to go do these 3 things. What's the probability of that success versus the probability of you understanding what are the challenges and you're actually developing the plan of how you're going to get those challenges handled? It's a completely different interaction level, and it's a completely different outcome that's going to be much better for the company, much better for you.
Yeah. So, you know, you and I were talking offline before, and you said it in the part that the number one area that you said you like to help people with was leadership coaching, mentoring, and development. And this thing that we're talking about right now, you would think, oh, this is all about technology. It really is more about people, isn't it?
Yeah, it's never, and you could ask my staff, they probably get sick of me saying this to them. It's never about the technology. Don't ever get hung up or in love with the technical solution you choose.
Yeah.
It's all about the people, it's all about the experience, and it's all about the outcome. If we focus on those things, great things will happen. If we get sidetracked or we have political wars about the technology we choose, that doesn't serve any purpose. That doesn't help us to get to where we need to get to.
You know, I love that phrase, people process outcome versus people process technology. Technology is a tool.
Right.
Technology is the tool, but people process outcome makes a lot more sense. You hear about KPIs and outcomes, and you said that in the earlier part of our conversation, which is if you're planning a complex systems, what are the outcomes? You said that. So that's really smart. That's your business background coming through. People process outcomes. That would make a great quote. So is there anything else you want to add? This has been an awesome interview. We went a couple of areas I did not think we were going to go to. I'm really excited that we did, though.
Just that I'm really happy to be part of this group, Alex. I appreciate you inviting me into it. You know, I believe together we achieve great things, and I believe we learn a lot from one another. And why pave the path if somebody else has done it and you can learn from it? So
yeah, that's so great. Thank you for saying that. I'm so grateful to have you involved and all your wisdom and hard-earned experience and wisdom, and we really appreciate it. So great interview, great talking with you, everybody. Kim Bailey from Michigan, from right here, the center of Michigan, over at Farm Bureau Insurance of Michigan. And thank you so much, Kim, for being on today's show, on today's discussion, and thanks for being part of our board of advisors.
Great, thank you.